Welcome to Smart Supply Chain, a podcast for supply chain professionals who think and work smarter. I'm your host, Shireen Garrison, along with my sister in supply chain, Sarah Garrison. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Shireen.
Today, we are talking about talent development at the intersection of supply chain excellence, artificial intelligence, and digital transformation. Our expert we're discussing this topic with today is Peter Bolstorff. Peter's a supply chain management expert. He's certified in transformation for supply chain. He's a certified supply chain professional and a SCOR professional. Peter is a successful entrepreneur, community volunteer, and supply chain management executive with more than 30 years of collective experience. He's currently the founder and chief executive officer of his third startup, Inspire sce.ai. Peter, welcome to Smart Supply Chain.
It is a pleasure to be here. I look forward to our talk.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming. Tell us a little bit about your new startup, Inspire sce.ai. What do you do there?
Well, let me talk a little bit about my background because, again, everything's a story that has a buildup, right? My basic degree is mathematics, education, and psychology. And so, again, like most folks my age in supply chain, we didn't start there. So most of us learn supply chain through the School of Hard Knocks. So as part of the volunteer community, I got engaged with the Supply Chain Council back in 1996, who was, of course, the author of the Supply Chain Operations Reference Model. And again, from there, the rest is history, which we'll talk about in a minute. But going back to the startup, so education and lifelong learning is really core to kind of who I am. And as we think about the convergence of these three big ideas, artificial intelligence, supply chain excellence, which has some proven things around it, and then digital transformation, we need to know more faster. And so this startup was developed to be able to provide education in microbytes to be able to help our supply chains leaders out there cope with the speed of change.
Peter, thanks for being here. This is Sarah. Tell us about your history with the SCOR model.
So again, I was with 3M Animation at the time. So by domain expertise, I'm a plan and a transform or make guy that goes all the way back then. And at the time in 1996, when the model was first launched by the Supply Chain Council, I was given the assignment of being the process manager for global planning for a company spun off from 3M called Amation. And when we figured out we had to implement Oracle, all of the consulting resources went there. And there was a small group of us, Center of Excellence folks at that time, who were tasked with really re-engineering the end-to-end supply chain process-wise for the company. And that's really where, again, I embraced the SCOR model because it at the time was really and still is the only end-to-end process model for supply chain and how do you measure one. So those of you that aren't familiar, SCOR DS, digital standard, is the new version of it. And you can find it at score.ascm.org. There's no login required.
Excellent. I mean, that is super exciting because you guys were developing something that didn't exist that really helped drive a bunch of innovation within the industry. And I think lots of us feel like we didn't get an opportunity to do that. And AI really does bring that opportunity for people within supply chain. Tell us how AI is impacting.
It's probably easier to say, how is it not impacting, right? So, if I had to think about one word, in terms of how AI is impacting supply chain, to me, the word is automation. Again, if you think personally, there are a lot of different applications in terms of personal branding, writing papers, doing research. So from a personal standpoint, kind of like, all of the personal, between Apple and Amazon, those personal assistants. So
you mean like individual?
Right. And if I say the lady's name, she's right to my left. She's going to start interrupting our podcast. So I'm not going to say the name out loud. Right. So I think people individually are progressing at a faster pace with Gen AI and AI things than the professional or B2B. But when we think about B2B automation, it cuts across just about everything: process, practice, performance, data, technology, and of course, people. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So again, I think the idea is it's changing, it's coming faster, and you're seeing automations all over the place, and not just in one process, in all processes.
Okay, so it's about automation within the supply chain. what specifically is trending?
So if you think about the different aspects, I'm going to rattle off about 7 or so as we think about this. So if you think about demand forecasting and planning, right? So all supply chains have to do some aspect of this one. AI algorithms are helping bring historical sales data, outside in market trends, and other pieces of data together to really generate a better forecast value add. And again, using lots of outside in types of data. Inventory management. So AI is being able to use transactional data to monitor real-time inventory consumption and automating reordering processes and those kinds of things. When you think about supplier selection and procurement, AI is helping evaluate supplier performance, which gives purchasing professionals more informed procurement decisions. They're also streamlining purchase orders and contract management. Again, you've heard the idea of smart contracts. Production and scheduling and optimization. So when you think about optimizing production schedules, you're using a lot of math to be able to come up with what are the optimal schedules to increase manufacturing efficiency. Logistics and transport management. So again, lots of stuff going on there, lots of things in the paper that you can read around route optimization, how you can use AI to automate load quotes, load tendering, and things of that nature. Quality control. So how do you leverage AI to do a more holistic approach to defect analysis and detection, automated inspections, et cetera? Customer service. So how do we use chatbots and virtual assistants to handle customer inquiries, processing orders, and other real-time updates? Again, all of us have experienced that with, ordering something from Amazon. And then the last one then is really this whole idea around risk management compliance is how do I set up AI structures so that I can kind of assess outside in activities for potential risks, disruptions, using weather patterns or other things that are out there. So as I said, the list is quite long, and every day you see an announcement that adds to the list, either in terms of making it wider or making it deeper.
Okay, I want to do all of those things in AI. That sounds amazing.
Great.
How do I tactically get started? How does an organization create an AI program to start looking at process flows and automation opportunities?
Well, that's a great question. So I'm always one to use monikers. So my moniker is think big, act small. And so a lot of folks in terms of, the act small is how do I really think about governing change, governing AI and supply chain as part of my supply chain strategy? That is opposed to seeing the most recent, advertisement that says, hey, automate this, and people going out and buying the technology and then trying to automate it, without understanding the risks associated with doing that. So again, my advice to anybody who's thinking about getting started, think big, it's coming or it's here, but act small. And again, if the 8 things, to think about governance, how do we kind of teach everybody the foundations of what AI is and understanding the impacts on people? What does an AI development cycle look like relative to our company or our supply chain? We're going to start here and we're going to go here. Are we going to develop our own language models, or are we just simply going to be using agents or tools from the outside in? How do we protect our IP? How do we think about those projects and systems? Do we have the right people to do that? Do we have the right measures of success? How do we make sure that AI systems comply with law? When we think about inherent biases, again, everybody would say our data is crappy now, and now we're just hooking AI up to it, and it's still crappy. So the question is how do we make sure we manage that better, and then have an eye to the future in terms of, again, Europe or other places that we do business in supply chain? How do we make sure that we're also understanding AI impact as it relates to that one? Kind of the key things around AI governance that need to be considered. And people are just getting started with this. Most people have been approaching AI implementation one use case at a time, right? So this governance things is more of a holistic thing as it relates to our strategy.
Yeah, and I think one of the things supply chain organizations are struggling with a little bit is how to think about the return on investment.
Yes, they are. And so one of the things that we know is companies are only using about 30% of the technology that they bought or the functionality they bought 5 years ago.
You mean what they have already?
They already have it, right? So
Yeah.
they invested money 5 years ago in, let's just say, 10 modules of a system, and they're only using about 3. And when you look at into the architecture, you still see Excel holding up large pieces of function. And so there's this latent return on invested capital just laying there. And so the question becomes, well, how do I go from 30 to 80? And so what we found is, again, where models like SCOR, process engineering and data engineering, information engineering is what gets you from 30 to 80. And from a change management standpoint, it's still complicated as always. But from a cost standpoint, it's more about not investing any more than I already have. It's about kind of re-implementing the tool that I own and then optimizing my process to use what I have. So it's a very systematic process. Again, it's not magic. It's hard work, but it's real.
Is that why companies are using so little of this stuff that they've already purchased? It's just because it's hard. They don't know how to put it together. What are you seeing in the trends?
So if you think about why a company isn't using their functionality, there's probably a host of reasons. Number one is, again, if I go back to the data wasn't very good. So we put a system on top of bad data and we told somebody to ignore Excel. And yet what's coming out of the system isn't very good. So they go back to Excel and they don't maintain the data.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it really goes back to data, and data quality, data integrity is one key component of that. The second reason is, again, there's no, I'm going to call it walk the talk around, we're not using Excel anymore. And I think it goes back to, again, if you remember back to again, I'm a 3M'er, right? So if you go back to the days where we had the Post-it notes, right? So if you really want to find out how something's going, you just go look at somebody's computer and you look at their Post-it notes, right? In terms of how they order them from left to right, that's probably how the process works, right? So, if you just walk the process, you learn a lot. And I think the third thing is really, again, in any system implementation, what gets shortchanged? It's training and change management. A lot of people underestimate the level of effort that you need to put into changing behavior, of folks that have been doing it this other way for many, many years.
That's a great point.
Yeah, change management is hard, especially with people. If they're used to relying on the things that they know and they understand, and nobody's teaching them or showing them how to use something new, they're going to always revert.
Right.
I mean, Excel is everybody's weak spot.
There was a funny picture I saw on LinkedIn. It had some of the best and brightest system application software names, kind of like this one. And then at the little bitty at the bottom, standing on its corner, was a little bit of, the Excel thing holding everything up, right? So if this little Excel icon fell away, then everything kind of falls.
We're going to take a brief pause in our conversation with Peter Bolstorff, and we'll be back with him shortly.
Hey, Shireen, Hannah Kain, our CEO, just popped by, so I asked her to come in and join us for a quick conversation in our intermission. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Hannah, many of our recent guests have mentioned tariffs as a disruptor in 2025, so we thought we'd get your thoughts. What are your top-of-mind perspectives on tariffs?
So thanks for asking about tariffs. I predicted that 2025 was going to be the worst supply chain year yet. And that says a lot because during the pandemic, we had some pretty bad years. So 2025 is not looking good, and tariffs and trade wars are really at the center of it. I read this survey in December that 83% of CEOs think that tariffs are going to impact the U.S. economy and their companies hugely in 2025. And I would say I agree. It's just a major problem. It's going to impact both the pricing of products. It's going to impact where we get products from. It's also potentially going to impact whether we can get products at all. And we are starting to see that now.
Yeah, there's so much uncertainty. So what are you doing proactively to stay up to speed?
There's a question about, do you have visibility to what happens? So that's why we are so active in different trade associations such that we get instant updates. The news organizations also are on it, so certainly that's a good source. But it's not enough to know what's going on. You need to be able to react to it. And our reaction is really based on a couple of different things. It's both having really strong supply network and be able to near source. Near sourcing lowers the risk of disruption. It also lowers the risk of being impacted, at least directly, by tariffs. And then, of course, it's just having really great supply chain professionals in the organization, being able to shift really fast and look up for our customers and for ALOM, frankly, also real time and understand what's going on so that we can go to our customers with great solutions that help them be very effective in the marketplace. So agility has become the new superpower that the supply chain professionals need to have.
If you had to give one piece of advice, Hannah, on companies looking into 2025, what would you tell them they should be thinking about in regards to tariffs?
I think the long-term 26, 27, 28 advice is to think about near sourcing. Now, near sourcing may often take time, so that may not work for 2025. If you have not prepared for 2025 and tariffs, you may just have to take it on the chin. So if you're not prepared for the tariff situation, it's going to be very hard for you to mitigate it unless you have a partner out there who already is looking out for you.
Wow, Hannah, there's a lot going on there. There's certainly a lot of uncertainty for the future with so many potential disruptions. Tariffs is obviously a huge part of that. It sounds to me like we're going to need to do a full podcast with you on this topic at some point. I'm going to try to get on your schedule to have a chat about that.
Well, this is a huge topic, and certainly the trade wars themselves are also impacting us as we are talking right now. We are already seeing impact on rare earth minerals and other factors that are not just tariffs, but really, frankly, down to the ability to get product into the U.S. or to get them manufactured. And we are seeing that these trade wars are going to explode. So 2025 looks exciting and not always positively exciting.
Lots of work to do. We look forward to it. Thanks for stopping by, Hannah.
My pleasure.
Now back to Peter Bolstorff on the Smart Supply Chain. So switching topics a little bit, as we think about that people piece and how AI is going to impact the workforce, how do you think about, what are the opportunities for new types of roles? How do people that are currently in the supply chain stay up to speed? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, that's what we're doing research on right now at Inspire sce.ai is what does that look like? What does that skill set look like? So again, when we think about the first thing is, again, if I think about back to SCOR, right now, the SCOR DS model will describe orchestrate, plan, source, transform, order, fulfill, and return. Again, at those macro level processes. I think one of the interesting things as AI continues to automate, it aggregates those processes still more. So we're still working through what do those macro processes look like? Order to cash, customer to delivery, source to settle. So we're still working on what does that aggregation look like? Because again, from an AI standpoint, it may aggregate across or up and down. So that's the first thing, is figuring that out. The second thing then is, as you think about those macro level processes, what are the important roles to make sure that the AI is supporting the people or assisting the people in the right way? Again, you've seen in the recent news, this idea of the agents are coming, right? These personal assistants. And so the question is, are you fearing them or are you welcoming them? And I think the difference is, do I know how I'm going to use them? And do I have a human in charge of managing them, right? Like a handler. And so here's some emerging AI roles, again, when you think about it, and you could apply that to forecast replenishment, order to cash, source to settle. I mean, you could apply it no matter what macro process you're talking about. One is stakeholder experience. Okay, well, what do you mean by that? Stakeholder experience would be customer experience, supplier experience, analyst experience. So how do I manage the experience that your organization is providing with the AI? Process optimization, and not necessarily at the micro process, but at that macro. Transactional automation. So how do I automate orders? How do I allocate inventory? Those kinds of things. Data quality is huge. And again, master data, for those of you in supply chain, has been more of a, that's not interesting. I think master data got upgraded in status when we started thinking about digital twins. I think now with AI, at the center, data quality is really, really important.
It's all about the visibility. You have to be able to know what's going on. And if you don't have the right data, it can all go wrong, right?
Right. Or if the data is wrong, you get the AI is happening. There's a new one that's part of data, but it's specific to AI. And again, being a mathematician, I'm going to call it LLM, large language model, vector integrity. What the heck is a vector? So the nearest I can tell, a vector is kind of a mathematical expression or equation of data that captures meaning. So if we think about order to cash as a meaningful thing, then how do I look at the direction of that data, whether it's customer master data, ship to location, transactional history? So how do I put meaning to that data so that if I ask the AI a question, it understands how to put things together? That is a new thing. I think about data science. You've got ethics and compliance going back to bias management. And then training and change management has to be critical. If you don't have, if you think about a macro process, you got to have somebody that has to own this idea around effective training. And again, that's how you solve the cultural fear issue, is making people informed. How are we going to manage the AI as opposed to how is the AI going to manage us? And then, and that's the whole paranoia. Now, let's be real. We're a capitalistic society, right? So, anytime you can look for ways to become more effective and efficient, again, businesses are going to act on that. I think the most important thing as I look at the supply chain profession is how do we start preparing folks to be able to do these roles and leverage the experience they have forward, as opposed to not.
Yeah, and using our time to really add value. I really like this idea about looking at the macro process, because I think we tend to, in supply chain, focus on those tactical things like, okay, we'll just go automate all the tactical things. But thinking about it from that macro level, I think is really important when you're thinking about AI. And it makes me think that looking at the SCOR model could help you prioritize where you start when you're starting the process.
Absolutely.
So you talked about the cultural fear, and I think that's a big one. When I think about AI, I think about the risk. I think about customer satisfaction. I think about all the things that could go wrong. How do you advise organizations to start kind of overcoming this fear?
Well, again, I go back to education. I think, again, when we go back to teaching people, this is what we mean by artificial intelligence. So let's turn off the reality TV for a moment and let's look at really what's in front of us. Good AI governance always has humans in charge of the AI. Now, you may be doing something a little bit different than you're doing today, but it's no different than ordering your groceries using Amazon and then specifying to a delivery agent on how do I get it to my house. So you're managing that process. You're not literally getting in the car, driving to the grocery store, getting your groceries and bringing them back. But you're still, again, stocking the fridge. And I think it's important for people to understand that still humans are managing that. Now, you may need a different tool set or a skill set. And I think that's really the first place to start, is really with education around what do you mean by AI? And then how do effective organizations manage it?
I think it should make us all feel good that it requires this supply chain experience and deep understanding that we have. We're just adding another skill on top.
I think you hit it on the head. For us as a profession, how do we leverage our experience forward? So make 1 + 1 3, as opposed to looking at it as a subtraction. AI is coming in minus me. And I think that's really the difference that we see in an AI first supply chain. People understand how it's 1 + 1 = 3, and how I'm going to have to learn how to use these AI agents, tools, and things to make my organization better and the customer experience or stakeholder experience better. Yeah.
It's one thing to make your internal processes better for your employees, but you do have to keep that idea of customer experience at the top of your head. We're customer obsessed at ALOM. We want to make sure that we're giving them everything that they need. So, how do you make sure that the customer isn't being negatively impacted by something that might really improve your internal processes?
Well, so let me come back. So, again, full transparency, I had the opportunity to work in a supply chain excellence workshop a long time ago with ALOM. And it was the first time that I had seen perfect order fulfillment actually being measured and managed. The true definition of what do we mean by a perfect order, from a customer point of view. So ALOM has, that's in your culture, that's in your DNA. And so when you think about your approach to anything, it's going to be how do we make sure whatever we do positively impacts that perfect order? And I think that's the important thing about governance is if we're going to be process centric around our AI governance, then which automations and which technologies do we have to bring in that will do that and help free up resources to be even more customer focused as opposed to, how do I bring this in and then move people somewhere else? So I think it's cultural. And I think it really starts with the leadership of the organization. And again, you have a model for that.
So, if other organizations realize we're really lagging in this area, we need to step up. How do they leapfrog to the front of the pack?
So I would say they're going to leapfrog. They may not leapfrog to the front, but at least they'll leapfrog to the first pack, right? So as you see, like the Tour de France, there's always kind of the leader pack, that group, so they'll be able to leapfrog somewhere into that range. And I think it goes back with, you have to understand and admit, where am I gapped today and why am I gapped? And then you need to understand the importance of long-term cultural investment, I'm going to call it, for lack of a better word. And so it can't be just do as I say. It's got to be do as I do, and it has to start at the top. If you bring in AI simply to take these jobs away and move them out of your organization, that's going to resonate. So you may say very well, hey, AI is going to help with the customer experience, but the first three things that you do eliminate jobs. That's going to play into how your culture is going to evolve. I mean, that's more than just AI. That's anything. It's just management practices.
It's all connected.
For sure.
So, Peter, tell us a little bit. I know I was digging around on your site, and I understand that you are doing some things around some free community activities and some other training. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when you think about Inspire SCE, Inspire Supply Chain Excellence, and again, a lot of people use the .ai as AI, artificial intelligence, actually all in. So when you think about supply chain excellence, all in.
I love that.
Yeah. So I think the big thing is, again, if you think about the reverse pyramid, the first thing that we want to do is we want to engage a community. It's an open community around building out use cases at this talent at the intersection of artificial intelligence, supply chain excellence, and digital transformation. And so again, we've just kicked our community off. We have a good core group. It's global. We have regional moderators. And the idea there is to bring use cases to bear, write a one-page executive summary on a particular use case. Again, think big, act small. Our first one is going to be supply chain process-centric AI governance. And, so what do you mean by that? And what is the value to an organization? And these use cases will be tagged using Creative Commons. So they'll be attributable to the community, but they'll be shareable across. And so, again, I think that's where we're starting. The other two educational pieces that Inspire sce.ai is focusing on is personal development, individual development around AI first supply chain strategy. And so you've got individual webinars, and we have a course starting in January. And then the second dimension and then is really around benchmarking, supply chains to admire, and then using that benchmark to actually then motivate people to rethink their AI first strategy. And we have a one-day workshop for that.
Amazing resources.
And lots of people in supply chain like yourself didn't start out going to school for supply chain. That's not what you were studying in school. Same with both Sarah and I. We didn't start in supply chain. So I think there's a lot of people who have just moved into this area and are curious to learn more. I think your new startup is a great place to start.
Interestingly enough, I have as many visitors from the AI community and the finance community as I have from the supply chain community. So it's been, again, trying to keep it simple. But again, as things progress, everything kind of merges together, this idea around aggregation around business. So,
well, there's so many great learning resources on your site, inspiresce.ai, and opportunities to be a part of the community, which we appreciate. I encourage everyone to go and take a look. That will have to be it, as we're almost out of time, but we do have one last question for you, Peter. And this is what we ask a lot of people. Tell us what your favorite vacation is or your best dream destination. What do you like to do in your off time?
Well, I have two answers to that question. So my wife and I, one of our favorite spots just to unwind is on the Big Sur. And so we're headed to Monterey Bay. We just love the area. It's a peaceful place to hear the ocean, see wildlife and all that. So that's that. If I had to pick a destination to live a second home in, I would pick, and these are from my Kiwi colleagues, I would pick New Zealand in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So I think about New Zealand, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but it's like California with no people. So it has amazing topology. I love the culture and lots of stuff to do there. Yeah. So there's going to be some New Year where my wife and I are going to be there for New Year's Eve, and it'll be the middle of summer.
Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you, Peter Bolstorff, for joining us today on Smart Supply Chain. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We're the Garrison Sisters. Catch you next time on Smart Supply Chain. Check us out anytime at alom.com. That's ALOM.com.